well. If you've got any issues, just put any messages in the notes, and Anna is also with us here to help you. Thanks for joining on this webinar today. I'm going to be running you through how to become the voice of the user. Just quickly, a little bit about me. I won't go into this too much detail. I'm one of the lead instructors at Colab, and I teach the product fundamentals cohort. It's a 10-week course, and it's for young and aspiring product managers. I also have my own small consultancy. I do product strategy consultancy for businesses, organizations, startups, large companies, big and small. I've worked in product for nearly 10 years in a variety of industries. I'm also a non-exec director for 2 organizations, and there again, I advise on product strategy and technology. I'm very, very passionate about discovery and building user-centric products, and that hope you'll see in this webinar today, how that's kind of informing my thinking and what I'm trying to cover in this webinar today. So what will you learn in the next 45 minutes? I am not going to talk to you for a whole 45 minutes tonight, so I hope you have some questions, because I would like to have a Q&A session towards the end. But I'm basically going to run you through 3 main points, which is, why is being the voice of the user important? How to be the voice of the user, which is easier said than done. And then how to give your users a voice within your company and organization. So it's not just about you understanding your users, it's about communicating that and getting your teams, getting your stakeholders on board as well. So I'll just dive right in. Why is this so important? And why is it so important for product managers? Well, let's just start with some basic stats, right? So if you think about voice of the user as your customer experience, there's lots of data out there to show that customers that are more successful if they are customer or user experience focused. Customers will pay more for a great experience and that understanding of what their pain points and needs are. And if you're not doing a really good job of understanding your customers, being the voice of your customer, and delivering products that your customers want and need, and kind of fits in with kind of their worldview, then, well, there are other companies out there that will do this. So this is a significant risk for companies that don't take the time to understand their users. And if you don't understand your users, if you can't hear people's voice and establish that within your company, you are going to struggle to deliver value. And that's what we're here to do as product managers. So I kind of just wanted to take this back to the product manager versus the project manager really quickly. It's as a key part of your job as being a product manager, or if you're aspiring to be a product manager. So we've got the usual key differences between product manager and project manager. So I'm hoping a lot of you are familiar with what these are. I just kind of wanted to add something to this, which is you are responsible for things like the success criteria, vision, market analysis, doing the prioritization of your requirements, but you are accountable for providing value to users. And that's where the voice of the user bit kind of comes in. It doesn't stop you from doing any of these other things that are part of your job, but being the voice of the user is part of all of the things that are key to a product manager's role. Okay, and if you don't believe me, listen to this guy, right? You've got to start with your customer experience and work backwards to the technology. So being user-centric and understanding your users, and then projecting your users' voice within your organization, starting with that, and then thinking about technology afterwards, is what most successful product managers will say is the way to go about how you develop your products in your company. And Steve Jobs said so. All right, so let's get on to the how. Hopefully I've sold you on the benefits of why you need to be thinking about being the voice of the user. So how do you actually do this in practice? Well, you start with empathy. Your goal is to empathize with your users. What do we mean by empathy? Well, empathy is the ability to fully understand, mirror, understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, and then share another person's experience, needs, and motivations. So it's not just about pain points. It is about needs, but it is about their worldview, as well as, you know, what are they trying to achieve with a certain task, and how can I fix that problem. So it's more about, it's more than just understanding people's needs and problems and pain points. Okay, so I now just kind of want to touch really quickly on, most product managers, even young ones, will know what discovery is, and discovery is a key part of a product manager role. What people know less about is what user research is. Now, actually, these two things are not very different at all. So I've got a couple of definitions here. And so, and you can kind of see just by reading this up, I won't read it out to you, but you can see that discovery and user research are very, very similar things. And so actually what product managers need to do, whether you have a user researcher in your team, and you're lucky to have one, if you do, or you're not, that this is an important part of your role. And so whether you're doing that actual work yourself, or you have other people that you can collaborate with this on, you kind of need to understand what you need to get out of user research as part of your discovery process. So what is user research? Well, there are two approaches to user research. User research means you're trying to understand what people's attitudes are and what their behaviors are. And there's a few different ways of kind of doing this. So I've got a few kind of methods here. Some of them you might have heard of. Most product managers, because I'm a consultant, I work in a lot of companies. Most product managers think this is, oh, I know, I need to do user interviews. Well, actually, it's a little bit more than that. So I've got a few kind of methods here. I'll go into these like very, very briefly. So contextual inquiries, like the first one, right? And so this is like in-depth observations and interviews with a small sample of people. And it is a really, really small sample of people, no matter what your product is. And if you have millions of users, a small sample of people. But it's to get them to kind of observe what they do and get them to describe what their behaviors are, why they're doing what they're doing. But you do this in their natural environment. So it can be things like going into a client's office and seeing how they work throughout the day, or something like that. Then you've got the naturalistic observation, which is, I mean, it is what it says on the tin. You kind of stand there, fly in the wall sort of thing, and you just observe. And that's like actually the most scientific way to kind of really understand what users are doing, and sort of, so you're not impacting their behavior, but you're trying to understand what do they do and why they do it, by just watching and just listening. Now, ethnography is a little bit different as well. It's those of you who have done any kind of social research will probably know a little bit more about this, but it's kind of like, I think the best way to kind of describe social research is like what the anthropologists do, right? They go and they go to a far off community, indigenous community somewhere, and they go and kind of live with them and kind of understand what their culture is like and things like that. But we actually have adapted ethnography, and a lot of it is actually done to help design and define how products in the software world should work. And then lastly, I think usability studies, which is a lot what a lot of people will also be familiar with, which is literally, it's kind of a qualitative sort of testing of software. Usually involves giving people a task, asking them to do something on their computer or something like that, and just watching what they do, asking why did you do that sort of thing, and seeing if they can actually perform a task, for instance. So all of these are very like observation to experimental. They can be in a natural environment or in a lab sort of environment. It kind of depends on every product, like what is the sort of need, but it's very qualitative data. It's quite time intensive, but you really get an essence of who your user is, and what are their attitudes, and what are their behaviors, and what are their values as well. Actually, I sometimes like to add to this, to really understand and empathize before you start thinking about what are the problems you want to solve, what a design of something might look like, what the priorities are. All of this is very open-minded sort of research. But you don't have to limit it to that. So that's very, I mean, you don't have to do just classic user research. You are product managers and you've got other, things that you need to do as part of your discovery process. So, but all of the things that I've just talked about don't stop you from understanding what is the market landscape. Oops, somebody's also just joined. What are the what you can use this opportunity to understand what other products have people tried, get them to show you how it works, what they like and dislike about a competitive product. This is hugely valuable as product manager. You can still actually use the opportunity to kind of test out ideas and just even if you've got a really quick sketch of something, test it out, show it to people, put a mock-up in front of people as part of that kind of process, because it's not so structurally kind of defined. So, you can be quite creative with how you might kind of throw other things in that you want to do as part of your user research. And then lastly, also what I like to do is improve your domain knowledge. In many cases, if it's a B2B product in particular, you might be working in an industry where you're not the expert, but you might have the expert that you're doing user research with. So ask them questions about the domain and learn from their expertise as well. So one classic user research doesn't have to stop you from doing these things. It just gives you more opportunities. Okay. So there was a lot of things there. And so what I like to do is like say, tailor your approach. There's no one right or wrong way. So I can't sit here and give you a kind of answer, but I hope you can see that you get to really be creative with how you design any kind of studies that you're doing to understand users and building empathy. I've loosely kind of split things out into B2C products and B2B products because you do have different challenges as a product manager. So with B2C products, obviously you've got a large volume of users. Okay, I've got 1 million users for my app. How am I gonna, I can't speak to them all, but also if I'm only focused on a small, 5 or 10 users that I've got the time and energy and budget potentially to speak to, is this really reflective? Well, with B2C products, you have a lot of data. So start with the data, the quantitative data that you already have, and use this to kind of think about, okay, use it to help direct you for where you want to carry out some qualitative research, and focus, and you really use it to go from, your quantitative data will tell you what is happening. Use it to try to understand why this behavior is happening by speaking to users. And so I will also add that, with ethnography and all of those kinds of ethnography in particular, because it's very popular, but all of the other methods that I explained in the previous slide, you only need small quantities of people, 5 to 10, to really get some really in-depth insights. So it is really valuable. And I would totally mean that. So even for any kind of academic qualitative study, it's usually around 15 people. So in a business setting, you won't be expected to have that level, or that amount of work. So actually 5 to 10 people is really, really perfectly fine. And even some of the biggest companies around the world, when they're doing detailed qualitative research, they start out with like 5 to 10 people. They really just do. So for B2B products, you've got some very different challenges. You might have a very narrow segment of users. So, and so once that pool of people has run out, you're like, what do you do? But also you've got more complex products as well. Well, what I would say is that focus on the quality of the research rather than the quantity. So again, very few people, you can still get a huge number of insights by doing qualitative research. And so, I would also kind of caution that you probably have more people that you can talk to than you realize. So let's say you've got a fintech product. You might want to talk to users. You might want to talk to the procurement managers. You might want to talk to the regulators, right? Your products are more likely to be complex, and they're probably different types of people that you can speak to. It's not simple like, I have a mobile app, there is a user, I need to speak to users. It's probably more complex than that. So think about who else you can kind of speak to. There's analysts and things like that there who can be a huge source of knowledge. And so you've got other user constraints, but again, things like, okay, well, maybe you've got you're in a regulated industry, so talk to a regulator. So your research needs to delve deeper than the obvious user who's going to just be using your product and your interface, presumably. Okay, so I've outlined a lot of methods there. I think like let's say you can pick for some of those methods, but then actually, what do you do when you've got all of this qualitative data? It's just lots of words, right? Um, and actually, when I look at when I go into kind of companies and I'm going into them to help them, and I say, okay, so what user research you have, I just get documents, documents and documents and documents of notes, bullet point notes, and you just think, well, okay, um, that is very challenging if all you have is documents and notes to kind of give your users a voice within your company, because it's a lot of work that you're giving your teammates and your stakeholders to do, to say, hey, read my documents, right? So what can you do to give your users a voice within your company or organization? Okay, so you've got a whole range of stakeholders, right? So I won't delve into this, but this is the kind of people I'm kind of thinking about in terms of who you want to share knowledge and with your users about, and who you want to maybe influence and help develop empathy for your users. Well, what you need to do is a little bit more work. And again, if you have a user researcher, this is very, very helpful. But if you don't, you need to yourself find ways to synthesize your data. So you've got to think about how can you make your findings more useful to your team. So think notes or video recordings from whatever user research sessions you might have had. How can you make this more useful? So imagine, put yourself in a setting where you're having a brainstorming session. What kind of information do you want to maybe put on a shared Miro board that helps you all to brainstorm in that brainstorming session? The second is like, what can you do to make sure that stakeholders engage with insights about your users, instead of, remember, please read my notes document for the interviews that I did, that they won't read. They definitely won't read. And then lastly, how can you present the information in a way to kind of make the best case at key moments and key meetings that you might be having, where you really need to influence people? Maybe your boss just doesn't think that something's an issue, or your designer or your development team thinks something else is a priority in your kind of sprint planning meeting. So what can you use to help influence those people, rather than just saying, I'm the product manager and please just do as I say? Doesn't always work. Well, the first thing I always use is empathy maps. So this is literally taking your interview notes and running through them and saying, and literally filling out this sort of template and splitting out everything into, say, what this particular person says, does, thinks, feels, what are their goals and pain points. And it can be pages of interview notes into one slide. You can make a 2-slide version of this as well. I will guarantee you, people read these things. I have never had a situation where I have sent this kind of document to somebody and somebody didn't read it, because it's just so easily laid out for them. And this one's a really wordy one, actually. It doesn't have to be as wordy as this. And some people like to use sticky notes on templates, which is also just perfectly fine. But this is literally synthesizing your interview notes into this kind of document. Now, when you've got a few of these, what you can actually do, which I hope you already know about, but actually so many product people don't know, so I'm maybe making a very obvious point here, is those empathy maps. You look for common trends between users and you base your personas on these sorts of behaviors. So I've got 2 examples of personas here. They are non-technical users of a certain, they work in the transparency space, but they have very different needs in terms of how they work with data. And this was a kind of example. So they are similar but not the same, but and it's based on empathy maps where I'm seeing different types of attitudes and behaviors, and that's how I've kind of split these things out. So again, maybe it's a bit wordy, but it's a very B2B kind of product, so I think you can use different templates for personas. But the important point is, you are taking your interview notes or your empathy maps and you are using those to create a fictional person based on those common threads that you're seeing. Now, what I often see is, my big complaint is, with personas, what often ends up happening is product managers and their teams, they kind of decide, okay, we need some personas. So they sit down in a room together, cut off from the rest of the world, and they think up what the persona might be. Your persona should actually be based on real real qualitative data from your user research or any conversations or any observations that you've had, synthesized into this. So it's based on real actual data rather than you sitting in a room and thinking up, who is my user? These will then be far more robust. Okay. I also like to use affinity diagrams. Anyone who's studied social science will probably know this is thematic analysis, but it's like a poor man's thematic analysis because we do not have time to do detailed thematic analysis. But affinity diagrams actually are a great way. And I hope the visual kind of explains what it is for itself. So you're seeing common threads. Again, you can do this for your, from your empathy maps as well. Take your empathy maps and see common threads and literally put sticky notes onto walls, use a Miro board, do whatever you like to do, but group different themes to help understand, what are the common behaviors, what are the common attitudes, what are the common goals, what are the common pain points, anything you like. It will help bring clarity. And so this should be a key part of your brainstorming session. So do it by yourself or do it together with your team, even more fun. But having this kind of thing, even like that kind of photograph and sharing something like that, or making it a bit more presentable and sharing that kind of artifact with a stakeholder really helps make your case for the user. And it really helps them to quickly kind of look at the different areas to kind of see, okay, we're seeing these kinds of themes. There's clearly some research and thinking behind that. Okay, these, PMA has got this, right? So it does actually really help to kind of build trust in the kind of research that you're doing and why you're making decisions the way you are. I also kind of like to use mental model maps sometimes, I guess, because maybe I work with a lot of data, so I like to understand how people view data versus how I might view data. And so this is the first visual is actually for someone who's applying for a job. So it's literally the mental model is about how does this person view the world? How does this person view the process of applying for a job versus what I think is logical, because people are not logical. So it's very important to kind of understand how people view the world and just be completely non-judgmental about it. So this is a kind of nice process to kind of follow, where there's like a task orientated sort of thing of, say, for example, applying for a job. The second one is actually, it's more of a map based thing. So this was like how people, this was particularly about international aid data for a project I was working on. It was about how users view the international aid world and therefore how and how the system kind of works. And I sort of mapped this out, and was able to show the client that the way you're presenting data to people is completely out of sync with how they view the world. And that's why they're having issues with using your products, your products and services. So again, just a little map where you've got things and how they're kind of connected, a mind map. It's really just a mind map, and that can be like really, really helpful. Do it for an individual user and then maybe see commonalities and do like an overall one for all of your user group. That could be quite helpful as well. Ecosystem maps. Now, this is one that I actually worked on. And so it is literally, if you're particularly new to a particular industry, I'm taking my time, new to a particular industry, this is a really nice thing to do to kind of see who are the players in this space, right? I did this one for the financial services system in Colombia because I'd never worked in Colombia before. And even though I have some experience in financial services, I didn't want to make any assumptions about how their system might work, what their attitudes and behaviors are compared to how things work in Britain. And there were some key differences and some organizations that wouldn't exist in Britain that exist in Colombia, and they play a very kind of different role. And so mapping this kind of thing out just also helped me to understand, again, like, who are the regulators, or who are the non-profit groups, or what kind of different types of banks are there, what are the different departments within the government. All of these things there were subtle differences to what I would expect to be the norm in the UK. And it helped to kind of reach out to a wider group of people as part of the research that we were doing. And so it kind of helps to just kind of map things out and use this kind of diagram with, your teams or your boss to kind of be like, okay, this maybe we'll want to prioritize speaking to these people. Maybe we think we need to do more observation here, that sort of thing. So it helps you make those kinds of decisions as well. Service blueprints. Again, this is one I've been working on right now, actually. This is like for more complex sort of processes where you might have like multiple different types of users using a piece of software in different ways. So this is actually for public procurement process, and they are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of users that interact with the system in different ways, have different permissions and things like that. And so this is a process of kind of like mapping out what that journey looks like. So the goal is like, it's very faint, so I hope you can see it. It's like publishing a bidding or tender contest. How does it start, and how does the process kind of work out to achieve that end goal, and who are the different people sort of involved? And then I've kind of like put in there like, what are the different technologies, what are the different documents they create. The yellow one is pain points, red is risks, and green is opportunities. So some of these maps get really, really crazy, but for very complex processes, this brings a lot of clarity. And you might have like 3 or 4, or if even more sort of maps like these if processes are really fragmented. And in large organizations, if you're trying to build software for large organizations that are complex, think BBC style or major bank, it can kind of get like this. But this brings a lot of clarity and helps you to kind of make decisions, identify pain points and things like that. So it's very, very helpful. And again, you get service designers, this is their kind of thing, this kind of document, they live in these things, but it's really, really useful for even product managers to kind of map out in this sort of way before you start making decisions about what you're going to do with your product. Okay. And then, so that was a lot of different things that you can use. And so, I apply different, I call them artifacts. I use different artifacts depending on what is the different problem I'm trying to solve. What are the challenges? What are the best types of user research that I need to do? So I won't use everything for every project. I kind of pick and choose, and that's what you should do as well. But I think what you instead of kind of getting stuck into the detail of what you put in these documents or how you create these documents, what's I'm keen to kind of emphasize is, you need to think about the bigger picture. So these documents are only valuable if you're going to use them for yourself. And so it's really important as a PM to kind of bring it back to the voice of the users. Why are you doing all of these loads of documents that I've kind of asked you to produce, right? It's because you really just want to use this to make sense of what is going on, to build your empathy. But you always want to link it back to the bigger picture, because you're in some real detail here. So you always need to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, is my product vision correct? Have I got the right problem statement? Are we looking at the right unique value proposition for our product? So going back to those things, and if you need to iterate them, you need to iterate them. That's fine. But just, I think what I want to be clear to emphasize is you've got to go back to and look at the bigger picture for your product. I would also I think I've hinted at this already, but use these to help others to empathize. So share this with your developers, right? So they are stuck in their code. They're not going to have time to talk to users. Help bring them on board by sharing these documents. And it's very, hopefully you'll see that they've been created in a way where the information is easily consumable. So it's not taking up loads of dev time for them to spend 5 minutes looking at your persona, for instance, right? So, and that is how you give your users a voice, by creating these very usable artifacts, sharing them with people, and getting them to build empathy, getting your colleagues to build empathy like you've built empathy. And then I would use them in meetings, use them to facilitate meetings. So your next brainstorming session, right? Whatever artifacts that you've created, print them out and stick them on the wall, sort of thing, and use them as a key part of your brainstorming exercise. Or in your sprint planning session, where you kind of need to make a point to say, this is really important, we've got to focus on this, and here is the service blueprint where you can see that this area is just a complete mess and it's obviously a massive pain point and a real opportunity for us to fix. Share that bit and help people to kind of see where you're coming from, rather than maybe just talking at them, right? So these can really help you to persuade when you need to persuade at key moments. But again, you're making it about the user. You're not making it about what you want versus what someone else wants, or you're in charge of the product, whereas, and so it's your decision. You're getting them, you're making it about the user. And so then it becomes less political, because we're all here trying to do the best job possible, right? And so I think if you can put it in that way to kind of influence and negotiate with people, then I think you're going to have much better chance of success. Okay. Okay, good. I thought this would take about 30 minutes, and it has done. So I do have a quick exercise, if you would all like to do a quick exercise or activity. It's only going to take 10 minutes, but this is a real opportunity for you here. So for a product, what I'd like you to do is decide how you want to conduct your user research. So like picking, a couple of the methods that I mentioned, or something else. Maybe 2 methods would be kind of good as well. And then maybe think about why these methods, and then think about how you want to synthesize your data. So some of the artifacts, maybe 1 or 2, it doesn't have to be more than that. And then how you think you might use those artifacts to be the voice of the user internally. So I'm happy to just give you 10 minutes to kind of maybe scribble something down, and then if you would like to present that back, or just say what you've kind of come up with, I'm happy to provide some feedback to just to help you out, help you to improve or something like that. So would you like so should I say 10 minutes? Should we say come back at, oh gosh, actually might have to make it a bit shorter, so I've got a few minutes to give you feedback. So can we say 7 minutes, and we'll come back at 22? Is that okay? I'm assuming no silence means yes, or something like that. All right, okay. I'll see you in 7 minutes. Right, everybody. Would anybody like to share what they've come up with in terms of their plan? And I'm happy to provide some feedback. I might pick somebody. Sheila. Hello, Sheila.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'd do is I'd conduct some user interviews with users of your product, and also conduct usability tests. And my reasons for that is I've seen usability tests in action, where you can do something with your own product and maybe a competitor's product as well. And then they're recorded, and you can show that to stakeholders, there's no denying that if a user can't find a button, or if they can't get through the sales process in a timely manner, that could be like the loss of a sale. So kind of combining those methods, you can do an affinity mapping and invite stakeholders to join, and therefore they kind of have to, it's a way of collaborating with them all, and also getting them to hear and actually will see the research, and not just read a document, as you say. It's getting people off their feet, actually, getting them to collaborate. And in that way, sometimes you also then have to kind of convert that into money, because at the same time, stakeholders, that's what they understand at the end of the day. So if you've done 5 usability tests and 2 of the people can't find the button, you might have lost 40% of your sales or something like that. So it's that kind of users, it's all well and good saying the user doesn't like something, or they could say, oh, the user's stupid, or whatever. But at the end of the day, when they can't click that sales button, it's the cost of the business at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I was toying with the idea of showing, there's a short video, you can find it online, about it was back in the 80s, I think, Xerox PARC, the senior people, they were saying, well, if people can't work out how to use our photocopiers, then they're just stupid. And then an anthropologist got them to use the photocopiers themselves, and they just couldn't. And so there's a long version of this video of these super intelligent, super senior people at Xerox who can't use their own photocopiers. And so that, it just shows you how useful these kinds of exercises are, to help people to understand that actually it's not the users that are stupid, it's probably down to your design or something needing improving. So I think that's a really good, I think your idea is a really good one, also doing comparing your product to another one is also really powerful as well. So, and affinity mapping those both. So that's great. Thank you. Would somebody else like to go next? How about Nika? Hi, Nika. Would you like to go next? No. Okay, might pick Marius. I think Marius is very shy. Okay, I might try one last chance. Adiola. Adiola. Sorry if I've said your name wrong.
No, it's fine. It's just that I unfortunately lost signal and just got back, so I haven't actually written much down. So I think I'm not really able to present. Sorry.
That's okay, no worries, that's fine. Okay, well, if you've got any other questions for me, now's your chance to ask. I just want to say a big thank you from us at Colab. We do teach a number of product management courses. I teach the product fundamentals course. The next one's starting in October. And so you can, well, what you can do actually is that you can visit the website. This is actually the outline for the product management fundamentals course. You can find out far more on the website in your own time. There's, if you want to use a QR code, that can take you to our LinkedIn page. I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, something's in the chat, but that might be new. Yeah. I think that might have been Anna. If you've got any other questions about voice of the user, I'm happy to answer now. No? Okay. Well,
I'm sorry, my hand, but I don't think you saw it.
I didn't see. Please go ahead.
So I wanted to ask if and I'm not sure if I missed this, if it was covered earlier, but within like a consulting perspective, so obviously like, you know, you're talking about a product manager. Most of the point of view that you've really discussed in this meeting has been like a product manager within a company. But what about like trying to find the voice of the user, like from a consulting perspective? So say you were, you know, doing product from a consulting perspective, you had a client who's the company and you needed to understand the user of that company, often within like quite stringent like time restraints, and help that company understand their user and you know, obviously to kind of like back up the product decisions you're going to be making in this project. Do you have any tips or like any preferences for what, you know, which of these methods you'd say would be better in that kind of circumstance?
I would say I wouldn't do anything differently. I would behave like the product manager, and you know, obviously if there's no user research, you need to convince people to prioritize it, and there's usually a reason why they haven't prioritized it. So, you know, and that's maybe a company culture thing, but your method should be specific to what's going to give you the best insights for your product, rather than I'm a consultant versus I'm not a consultant. So I wouldn't say that that's really a factor. Yeah. And it's true, but that you know, if you're a consultant on a project, you're working to a time scale, but you know, full-time product people work to time scale as well. So I don't think that makes a difference. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So again, it's about the user. It's not about the product person and what kind of role you're in. So it's just really got to be focused on the user. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I think we'll leave that there because we are on time, maybe late by a minute. And so I didn't want to keep you any longer.